What happens when a man who has lost everything is forced to choose between staying in the shadows of his past or stepping into the light of redemption? For 3 years, Caleb Thorne buried himself in silence, believing love was a cruel trick and life had nothing left to offer. But one stormy night, a stranger knocked at his door, a woman carrying secrets of her own and a voice that would shatter the walls around his heart. This isn't just a story about loss. It's about the power of human connection, about how two broken souls can find healing in the most unexpected places. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next will change everything, not just for Caleb, but maybe for you too. If stories like this move, you don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a tale of hope, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life. Now, let me take you into the storm that changed everything. Caleb Thorne looked like a man who had forgotten how to live. He stood rigid on the warped porch of his isolated ranch, boots planted wide as though bracing against the world itself. His hollow eyes stared at the horizon, but they didn't really see it. 3 years had dulled them, 3 long, brutal years in which he'd let grief carve him hollow. The wind swept dust across his weathered face, tugging at the long scar that cut from his temple to his jaw. He didn't flinch. He couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken more than a handful of grunted words to another living soul. Probably at the trading post, where people stared too long and whispered too much. Love, he had decided long ago, was nothing but a blade waiting to cut deep. It always ended the same way, with blood ashes and a silence too heavy to bear. Above him, storm clouds roiled thick and black, churning like a monster awakening from sleep. They promised the kind of rain that could swell the creek until it devoured the valley whole, drowning anything foolish enough to wander out in it. Caleb barely registered the distant rumble of thunder. Weather was just weather. Pain was just pain. And people were nothing but carriers of heartbreak. Inside the cabin, silence clung to the walls like mold. He could almost hear the echoes, the laughter of a woman who once called this place home, the light patter of tiny feet racing across the wooden floor. Voices calling his name with joy instead of fear. But those ghosts weren't welcome anymore. He'd trained himself to see past them, to choke down the memories until they turned to ash in his mouth. Caleb ate his meals alone at a table built for 4. He slept in a bed meant for 2, though he always stayed to one side, leaving the other untouched as if its occupant might return. The only living thing he spoke to was his horse, and even then, it was out of necessity. As the first drops of rain began to fall, he turned to go inside. His boots creaked on the boards. The storm would trap anyone caught on the trail, a blessing, really. He needed no visitors. But then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. The faint rhythmic pounding of hooves growing louder with each beat. Caleb's hand drifted to the Colt holstered at his hip, fingers brushing the worn grip out of instinct. No one came here. No one even knew about this ranch, hidden deep in the forgotten folds between territories. Visitors didn't happen by chance. Visitors meant trouble. And trouble meant someone wanted something from him, something he had nothing left to give. The sound of hoofbeats cut sharper now, louder thudding against the earth in uneven rhythm. Caleb Thorne didn't move from the porch, but his grip on the Colt tightened. Rain slicked the boards beneath his boots, and he felt the cold bite through his shirt. Lightning cracked across the sky, painting the world in stark white for a breathless moment. Through the growing curtain of rain, a shape emerged, small, hunched against the wind, fighting to stay upright on a struggling horse. Caleb's brows drew together. Whoever this was, they weren't made for frontier life. No rugged canvas coat or oilskin hat shielded them from the storm. Instead, their clothing flowed strangely dark fabric, clinging wetly to their frame, like some exotic bird dropped into a wasteland. The horse stumbled in the mud near his fence, and the rider barely held her seat. Her. Caleb's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in years, he felt the slow coil of surprise stir in his chest. She wasn't like any woman he'd seen in these parts. Her features were delicate, almost fragile, framed by long dark hair plastered to her pale face by the rain. She wore robes that marked her as something religious, though Caleb had never known a nun to dress in flowing silks. A flash of lightning illuminated her again. She was young, late 20s perhaps, with eyes that seemed to burn even in the storm dark pools, holding a strange mix of desperation and peace. Please, her voice cut through the roar of wind, high and melodic with an accent he couldn't place. I need shelter. Caleb didn't answer. His instincts screamed at him to turn his back, to let the storm swallow her whole. He had built this life, this fortress of solitude, to avoid exactly this, another soul, needing pulling, threatening to crack open the walls he'd spent 3 years fortifying. But her horse reared suddenly, spooked by a clap of thunder. She cried out as the animal lost its footing, its hooves thrashing in the mud. For one terrible moment, he saw her eyes wide with fear as the horse toppled sideways. She fell. The sound of her body hitting the ground seemed to echo in his ears louder than the storm. Damn it, Caleb muttered under his breath. Every instinct told him to stay put, to let fate take its course. It wasn't his problem, not anymore. But his boots were already moving, pounding down the porch steps before his mind could catch up. The memory hit him hard, another storm, another cry for help he hadn't answered. That time silence had cost him everything. As he crossed the yard, mud splashing up his legs, her horse bolted into the darkness, leaving her small form crumpled near the fence. She wasn't moving. Caleb's heart thudded painfully in his chest. If this story has already gripped your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you never miss our next tale of redemption and hope. And tell us in the comments, what would you do if you were in Caleb's shoes? Would you open your door to a stranger in the storm, or keep it locked tight? Your thoughts and support mean the world to us. It helps us bring more powerful human stories like this to life. The rain came harder now, turning the yard into a slick ocean of mud. Caleb knelt beside her limp body, breath clouding in the cold air. Up close, she seemed impossibly small, her skin pale as moonlight under the blood streaking down her temple. For one awful second, he thought she was dead. Then her chest rose shallowly. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His calloused hands hovered above her, unsure. Touching her would mean letting the world in again. Caring. It would mean tearing open wounds he'd spent 3 years sewing shut with jagged, uneven stitches. But the storm wasn't waiting. Another crash of thunder made her flinch, even in her dazed state. Her lips moved faintly, shaping a single word. Help? His jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Damn her. Damn this storm. Damn the ghosts that were already stirring like restless vultures in his mind. He scooped her up into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her head lolling against his shoulder. Wet hair plastered across his throat. Inside the cabin, he kicked the door shut behind him. The slam echoed like a gunshot in the silence. The warmth inside barely touched the cold knot twisting in his gut. He laid her gently on his bed, the same bed he hadn't let anyone near, since Eliza's laughter had died in these walls. For a moment, he just stood there staring. The weight of her presence pressed against him like a boulder. With shaking hands, Caleb fetched water and a rag, crouching at her side. As he cleaned the blood from her forehead, her eyes fluttered open. They were dark and deep and far too steady for someone lying injured in a stranger's house. "You live here alone?" she said, her voice a soft rasp, accented and musical. It wasn't a question. Caleb's hand froze. "That's how I like it." "No." Her voice, though weak, carried a quiet certainty that cut straight through him. That's how you survive it. The words sliced deep. His jaw worked as he dipped the rag back into the water, scrubbing harder than necessary just to keep his hands busy. "You don't know anything about me," he muttered. "I know you're a man who carries pain like a second skin." Her eyes searched his face not with fear or judgment, but with something far more dangerous understanding. "And I know you helped me when you didn't have to. That says more about you than the walls you've built." Caleb stood abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor, his fists clenched at his sides. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. But even as the words left his mouth, they felt hollow. "Are you feeling the storm in Caleb's heart as much as the one raging outside? This is just the beginning. What happens next will test everything he thought he knew about pain, love, and forgiveness." Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss the rest of this powerful journey. And tell us in the comments, do you think Caleb deserves a second chance at life and redemption? Or is he too far gone? Your thoughts help us bring more stories of hope and healing to people like you. The storm raged on, hammering the cabin roof like 1,000 angry fists. Inside, the air felt just as electric, charged with unspoken truths and dangerous emotions that crackled between them. Caleb stood with his back to the fire, hands gripping the mantle until his knuckles went white. "Why are you really here?" His voice was low but tight, like a rope stretched too far. "Don't tell me it's just the storm. People like you don't end up in places like this by accident." Sister Hannah sat propped against the pillows, her dark robes clinging to her slight frame as the firelight danced across her face. For the first time since he'd found her, her steady eyes flickered not with fear, but with hesitation. "I was traveling to the mission settlement," she began, voice calm but edged with something heavier now. "Father Elias wrote to my order months ago. He spoke of a man living in isolation beyond the ridge, a man who'd lost everything and walled himself away from the world." Caleb felt his chest tighten. "You mean me?" Hannah nodded slowly. "He asked if someone might reach out, someone who knows what it means to carry guilt." His fists slammed against the mantel with a force that rattled the lanterns. "So this is what he snarled. Some kind of salvation mission. You and your priest decided I was a stray dog to be rescued." "No one can save another person," she said evenly. "We can only offer a hand when they're ready to reach for it." "Well, I'm not reaching." He turned away, pacing to the window where rain lashed against the glass. "When morning comes, you can go back to your mission, and I'll go back to my life. The life where you punish yourself for surviving when they didn't." Her words cut so deep it felt like his ribs cracked open. "You don't know a damn thing about me," he barked, spinning on her. His face was flushed, his breath ragged. "You don't know what I've done, what I've lost. I know what guilt looks like," Hannah said softly. "I see it every day, in the mirror." Her calm struck him harder than shouting would have. She took a trembling breath. 5 years ago, I was engaged to be married. His name was Takeshi, a kind, patient man. But I broke it off to chase a life I thought had more meaning. 2 weeks later, he ended his own life. The words settled between them like a heavy shroud. I thought if I dedicated my life to God, to helping others, it might balance the scales. Her voice cracked, then the first crack in her composure. But guilt doesn't work that way. It doesn't leave until you forgive yourself. Caleb's anger drained like water from a shattered jug. He staggered back, lowering himself into the chair across from her, staring at his hands. "And have you forgiven yourself?" he asked hoarsely. "I'm learning to," she said. "Every person I help teaches me a little more about grace." For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm outside began to ebb, the wind's howl softening into a mournful whisper. But inside the cabin, something else was shifting. something far more dangerous than any thunderclap. You really think it's possible Caleb's voice was barely above a whisper? To live with this kind of guilt and still find peace? I think the people we've lost would want us to try, she said gently. When he looked up, her eyes caught his like a hook sinking deep. In their depths, he saw something that terrified him more than raiders, more than death itself, the faint glimmer of hope. The storm had passed, but inside Caleb Thorne's chest, another one raged on. Dawn broke gently over the valley, pouring soft gold through the cabin windows. The air smelled of wet earth and wood smoke. For the first time in 3 years, Caleb noticed how alive the world felt after a night of chaos. He hadn't slept. Sister Hannah was awake too, sitting at the edge of his bed with her robe drawn tight around her shoulders. Her face was pale but calm, the firelight catching in her eyes like embers refusing to go out. "Come with me," she said softly, breaking the silence that had wrapped around them since their confessions. Caleb froze where he stood by the stove, a tin mug of coffee in his hand. "What? To the mission," Hannah said. "There are children there who need someone like you. Someone who knows what it's like to lose everything and still keep going." The words hit him like a hammer, splintering through the fragile shell he'd rebuilt over years of solitude. "You don't know what you're asking." His voice was low, rough. "I'm not a teacher. I'm not a healer. I'm a man who's good at being alone." "No," she said gently but firmly. "You're a man who ran into a storm to save a stranger. A man who remembers how to be gentle even after years of trying to forget." He turned away, staring out the window at the sun climbing over the ridges. "You're asking me to leave the only place where I feel safe. I'm asking you to leave the place where you feel dead." Her voice was quiet, but the words slammed into him harder than a bullet. Caleb set the mug down with a trembling hand. His breath came shallow. "What if I can't do it?" he whispered. "What if being around those children just tears me open again?" "Then you'll grieve," Hannah said. "But you'll keep going, just like they do every day." The silence that followed was thick with possibility. Caleb closed his eyes. He saw Eliza's smile, heard Clara's giggle as she galloped through their home pretending to be a horse. The memories no longer felt like knives. They felt like something precious, fragile, and worth carrying forward. When he opened his eyes, he found Hannah watching him with a mix of compassion and quiet determination. "Why do you care what happens to me?" he asked hoarsely. "Because when I look at you, Caleb Thorne, I see what I might become if I stop fighting. I see what happens when someone lets their worst moment become their whole life." Her voice softened. "And because saving you might be the only way I can truly save myself." For the first time in years, something warm and painful bloomed in Caleb's chest. "Broken parts and all," he murmured. "Broken parts and all," she echoed, a small smile tugging at her lips. By midday, they were riding toward the mission together. The trail wound through valleys lush with new growth, the air fresh after the storm. Hannah rode ahead slightly, her posture graceful, even on horseback. Caleb followed, his heart pounding, not with fear this time, but with something harder to name. When the mission settlement came into view, it looked like a dream. Small adobe buildings clustered around a modest chapel, and gardens stretched out like green patches of hope. Children's voices drifted on the breeze, not carefree laughter, but something more cautious, shaped by loss, yet still alive. Father Elias came out to meet them, his lined face breaking into a wide smile. "Sister Hannah, thank God you're safe. And you've brought—" His eyes settled on Caleb with recognition and quiet relief. "Help." The children gathered slowly, their wary eyes fixed on Caleb. He dismounted, crouching to their level. "My name's Caleb," he said softly. "I hear you've got some fences that need fixing." A small boy stepped forward, no more than 7, clutching a wooden toy horse. "Can you teach us to ride?" Caleb's lips twitched the ghost of a smile, finding its way to the surface. "I reckon I can." As the children's questions poured out, Caleb felt something shift inside. The ache was still there, but it wasn't hollow anymore. It felt full of possibility. That night, as he watched the children run and laugh in the fading light, Hannah came to stand beside him. "You did it," she said simply. Caleb shook his head. "No, we did." And for the first time in years, he believed it. At its heart, this story is about the fragile, unbreakable thread that binds all human beings, the need for connection, even in the aftermath of unspeakable pain. Caleb Thorne's journey from isolation to redemption reminds us that grief, though heavy, does not have to define the rest of our lives. The loss of his family turned him inward, building walls so high that even his own memories could not climb them. Yet in the unexpected arrival of Sister Hannah, a stranger, carrying her own burdens, he is forced to confront the truth. He's been running from healing cannot happen in solitude. This tale touches something deep because it reflects our shared fears. The fear of loving again after loss, the fear of letting someone close enough to hurt us. But it also offers hope that even in our darkest moments, a spark of humanity remains waiting for the right person or the right moment to reignite it. The story's most powerful lesson lies in its quiet moments, Caleb carrying Hannah through the storm, his hands shaking not from the cold, but from the terror of feeling again. Hannah's confession of guilt mirrors his own, showing how two broken people can become mirrors for each other's redemption. It tells us that redemption isn't about erasing scars, it's about learning to live with them, and perhaps even letting them guide us towards something greater. It's about the courage to choose connection over comfort and hope over fear. This is not just a story about loss, it's a testament to the human spirit's ability to rebuild, to love again, and to transform pain into purpose. And that's what makes it unforgettable. The story doesn't end here. In the next video, we'll take you into another powerful tale of hope and healing. Don't miss it, click and join us there now.